Hello, I'm Chrissy Seaton and welcome back to my YouTube channel. We're continuing on with looking into the Psalms, not necessarily in order of, 1 to 150, but we are picking out some Psalms that may be appropriate, that jump out at me at certain times, have specific meanings at times. So we're kind of picking them out randomly and going through them where it's appropriate. Now, I have mentioned this before, I know, but I will mention it again, that every year we have a birthday, and in my case, this year, I will turn 73. And the appropriate psalm for me for that whole year that I am 73 is Psalm 74. And that applies to all people. So whatever your however old you are on your birthday, it's the next psalm after that in number that is yours for the whole year. And, you read it frequently and there is meaning to it for you. So that's what I'm doing today. I am going to talk about Psalm 74 and in preparation for when I turn 73 in a few days' time. So I've called this the pain of exile because it does talk about that. Now, the previous Psalm, Psalm 73, it sort of talks about why righteous people suffer. So if you wanted to go and read that at some stage, that's good as well for you to understand that. But Psalm 74 is really addressing the pain of exile. Why, how long does it go on for? Why? The ethereal question, isn't it? So it is a rather long one, so I'm not going to read the whole psalm out to you. I'm going to read the commentary. So what I would like you to do is you can go stop the video now and perhaps go and read Psalm 74 and then come back and listen to the explanation, because some of them psalms are rather lengthy, and I am conscious of the fact that people don't have a lot of time in their days, and I like to make things as economical time-wise as I can. However, I don't also want to lose the essence of the psalm. So let's have a little look here. Now, Psalm 74. Now, the psalmist is talking and studies the most painful example of apparent injustice, and that, of course, he refers to then as the exile of the Jews. Now, it's not only Jews that go through, there's a long history, but each and every one of us individually go through a type of exile at some stage in our life, for whatever reasons, which may vary. And it's a very painful experience if you're cut off from something by no fault of your own, and sometimes it can be because you've done something or said something or omitted to do something, and you're kind of cut off from your normal flow of life and activity. So let's start by looking at what does it say with verse 1. Now it says, a maskil by Asaph. Now this is delivered from Wisdom, Enlightenment, and Asaph was a brilliant thinker who utilized his wisdom to instruct people. So we're talking about Asaph, and so he was able to put things into words of wisdom for people. It goes on now, and it says that, why, O God, have you abandoned us for eternity? And the first Babylonian exile was limited to 70 years. Some of you would realise that. But this second one, Rome exile, the exile from Rome, still continues with no end in sight. And then it continues on, still in the same verse 1. that against the sheep of your pastor, the events of the exile seem incompatible with your role as shepherd of Israel. For the shepherd's job is to protect his flock. While you seem to have abandoned us to all forms of danger and destruction. Pretty bold statement, isn't it? So then we go on now to verse 2, and it says the example is, you redeemed the tribe of your heritage. Now, since they are your eternal heritage, so they're talking about the Jewish people, just as you redeemed them in the past, so shall you redeem them again. Now, the psalmist refers to all 12 tribes as one tribe because they left Egypt in complete unity and solidarity as one group of people. So that's just good to know that. Now, it goes on and says, the mountain of Zion, the one where you rested, your presence. Now, rebuild your temple, if not for our sake, then on behalf of your Holy Spirit, which was housed there. See, this is something that people don't understand, or we fail to sort of connect with, is the actual essence. The Spirit of God dwelt there. And even today, when you go to Israel and walk around those areas near the Temple Mount and at the Western Wall, there's a presence, there's an essence that is very hard to describe, but you feel it. You feel it. It infiltrates you. So imagine what it was like before the temple destruction, when the essence of God was more than just an essence. The Spirit that was there. It was there. And if those of us who haven't experienced that, it's hard for us to even put that into words. So let's continue on. Now we're looking at verse 3. To avenge. Now, everything that the enemy has harmed in the sanctuary, meaning most decrees announced by the Roman oppressors, were aimed at tearing Israel from the source of sanctity. Very important. By prohibiting the study of Torah and the performance of their precepts. Now, this goes on at different stages throughout history too, where they've been isolated from their studies. Second World War is an example. Now, number 4, verse 4, your enemies have roared amidst your meeting place. Now, the temple is the place where God and Israel convene, and there's a reference here to Exodus chapter 25, verse 22. Now, it was this unique bond that the Romans sought to sever when they defied the meeting place. They defiled the meeting place, the Romans. Titus unsheathed his sword and stabbed the holy curtain, for he imagined that he could thereby cut God away from Israel. How frail the human intellect is. Goes on and says they made their signs for signs. Blood flowed from the curtain when Titus stabbed it, giving him cause for concern. He interpreted this as a sign that he had slain God himself. Oh, how frail his brain was. The blood was actually a divine sign to Israel that God was suffering over their tragic plight. Thus they made blood, which is generally a sign of human death, as if it were also a sign of divine death. Following this, Sophona, they made their signs, that is, they misinterpreted signs intended for encouraging Israel as signs that they had defeated God. They got it so wrong, didn't they? Alternatively, this phrase refers to the destruction of the first temple at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. he received heavenly signs that were meant to encourage his assault on Jerusalem. Thus they, the attackers that is, made their heaven-sent sign for meaningful signs. So that was an alternate. Now verse 5 goes on and says the axes and the trees. When the temple was built, many people took up their axes and went into the forest to chop trees that would supply wood for the temple's construction. They performed this mitzvah with joy and devotion. They performed this mitzvah with such joy and devotion that God appreciated and considered their contributions as an offering brought to him, an offering to God on high, before the celestial throne. Similarly, the enemy sought to destroy the temple only in order to destroy the sanctity of God on high. The attack on the wood and stones was considered as an assault on God. You don't think it can get any worse, do you, sometimes, the psyche of how people think. Now, let's go on, and we're at verse 6 now, where it says they beat down. Now, the enemy was bent on wiping out the beauty of the holy city. Rabbi Hirsch adds that even after the structure of the temple lay in ruins, the enemy searched through the debris for any remaining engraved fragments bearing the holy design of the temple. They sought to destroy God's glory and to eradicate every vestige of Judaism. Excuse me. Now, it's very hard to imagine that people can do this, isn't it? Now, now verse 7, it goes on and says that they have sent your sanctuary up in flames. To the ground have they desecrated the abode of your name. Now we're going on into verse 8. Now their rulers altogether said, the kings who attacked Israel all began with an assault on God and his abode. The Philistines destroyed the tabernacle at Shiloh, and Nebuchadnezzar laid waste to the first temple, and Titus razed the second temple. Razed means destroyed, burnt, destroyed by fire. Now, Sforno renders that not as their rules, but as their descendants. The enemy realised that Israel can be eradicated only through spiritual genocide and assimilation. And it's in recent years that's been discussed many times by people who have no business discussing that. The future generations must be weaned from their heritage and joined together with the non-Jewish masses. That's what it's describing in verse 8. Therefore, the enemy burned all of God's meeting places on earth. They destroyed the synagogues and houses of Torah study in an attempt to strip our descendants of the Jewish identity forever. This happened again in the prelude to World War II too, and during it. Verse 9, our signs we have not seen. Now, Asaph now foresees the final stages of the exile and laments. Through your prophets, you promised us that at this advanced stage of exile, we would begin to see clear signs of imminent redemption. But we have not yet witnessed any such signs. Now, it goes on and says, in the past, even after you abandoned us to the enemy, you swiftly returned to show us signs of favour. After the Philistines devastated Shiloh and captured the Holy Ark, you toppled their idols and plagued their populace, thus displaying your displeasure. But when Titus profaned the Holy of Holies, he escaped unscathed. Now, there's a reference there too to see 1 Samuel chapter 5 if you want to just follow up there. It continues on still. This is the commentary for verse 9. Hagar, Zechariah, and after the last, there is no longer a prophet. After the last prophets, Hagar, Zechariah, and Malachi, no man was granted the knowledge of when the redemption would take place. And there's been lots of people surmise it and think there's signs, etc., but they weren't told a given time. Or we await the event of Elijah, the prophet of redemption, who will appear before the Messiah, but it says even he tarries. So we're taught that Elijah will come and announce the Messiah, or he may come at the same time as the Messiah. They come together. That's a whole other story. Now, verse 10 the commentary goes on, until when, O God, will the tormentor revile? After raising the second temple, the tormentor, meaning Titus this was, travelled over the sea to make a triumphant entry into Rome. A storm arose and great waves threatened to sink Titus's ship. He reviled God and said, it appears that this God of the Jews is truly helpless. His power extends only over the sea, for he drowned Pharaoh and Sisera in the sea, but on land he can do nothing. How long, O God, must we be forced to hear such insults from the arrogant tormentors, while the foe blaspheme your name forever? The foe accuses our God of impotence and claims that he is incapable of delivering us from exile. Incredible, isn't it? Verse 11, why do you withdraw your hand, even your right hand? Now, there's an explanation here. Your hand refers to the left hand, which symbolises strong judgment. The psalmist wonders why God withdrew his strong hand and did not administer harsh judgment to the marauding nations. Further on it says, continuing, your right hand signifies merciful kindness. Even his divine attributes was withdrawn, and God showed no compassion to the downtrodden Jews. Now we go into verse 12 explanation. It says, for God is my king from days of old. But now, as we suffer without respite, it seems as if he is no longer my king, working salvations in the midst of the earth. Now, O God, although your exalted throne is in the highest heavens, remember how in days of old you would descend to the midst of the earth, the land of Israel's enemies, to champion the cause of your chosen. Verse 13, you shattered the sea with your might. Now, one of your salvations was the splitting of the Sea of Reeds. You all know that story, which was shattered into 12 separate paths, one for each tribe. There's a lot of people who don't realise that, especially people outside the Jewish or Noahide faith. But it was actually 12 lanes, opened, like a 12-lane highway. 12 separate paths, one for each tribe. You smashed, in continuing verse 13, you smashed the heads of sea serpents upon the water. Now, sea serpents refer to Pharaoh and the Egyptians. See Ezekiel chapter 29, verse 3. The waters of the sea hardened like stones, smashing their heads. Now it goes on and says, comments regarding the flow of these three verses. After wording why God had withdrawn his right and left hands, representing his attributes of mercy and judgment, the psalmist recalls that at the sea, God used both those attributes simultaneously by saving the Jews and punishing the Egyptians. Verse 14, the head of the Leviathan. Now, Leviathan is another reference to Pharaoh, and that is Isaiah chapter 27, verse 1. Now, Targum and Rashi, so God gave Israel the spoils of Egypt prior to their journey through the wilderness. And you all know that story. I mean, Pharaoh couldn't give them enough just to get rid of them. He wanted to get them out of Egypt and gave them all sorts of treasures to take with them. Now we're going, if I can get this page turned over. Okay, so that is the beginning of page 14. Now we're going at verse 14. Goodness me. Now, verse 15 says, you split open fountain and stream. You split rocks and caused fresh water to flow in the parched wasteland. Now it goes on and says, you dried the mighty rivers. Now this refers to the Jordan River. In early spring, its banks can hardly contain its waters because it is fed by the flow of many small tributaries, that is, mighty rivers, meaning. You stopped the flow of the Jordan and dried the riverbed so that Israel could cross over to Canaan in the time of Joshua. So it can even dry up riverbeds. Verse 16, yours is the day, yours is the night. Now, God daily demonstrates his majesty and mastery over all natural forces and the processes accompanying them, or separate. In his beneficence, he causes the dawn to break so that man should be aroused to action, and he causes the darkness to fall so that man should be forced to rest and gather strength, while the wild beasts are afforded an opportunity to hunt undisturbed under cover of darkness. We all know there's all sorts of things come out at night, and that's the reason, because some people hunt through the day. Some animals, species hunt through the day and some at night. So, now allegorically, the day signifies the bright moment of Israel's redemption. Just as God will surely be with us then, we must be firm in our faith that he is with us even now, in the dark night of our exile. So this is addressing the Jews, but non-Jews, righteous Gentiles, can glean information and assurance. And we're taught that God is with us always, always. Now, verse 17, excuse me, you established all the boundaries of earth. Now, you established geographic divisions on earth with different climates, and you designed separate continents inhabited by diverse people. Now, none of us will argue with that. Summer and winter, you fashioned them. Here again, the psalmist emphasizes that God created opposite forces, each appropriate in its time, the heat of summer and the cold of winter. We see this every day, year in, year out. That is all God's plan. People say, oh, it's the way the heavenly solar system rotates. Well, it might be, but who do you think created that? Above, here on earth, and below, everything created by God. Verse 18, remember this, the foe reviled Hashem. Now remember, O God, that although you performed all these wonders, The foe persisted in insulting you by questioning your might. Now, Malbim adds that although we see God in nature, and we do, I always say, you see a tiny, tiny little lady beetle crawling up the stem of a plant in your garden, and you just say, how can there not be a God? It's just, you can't argue it, can you? Oh, God, O God, that although you performed all these wonders, the foe persisted in insulting you by questioning your might. I'd read that, I beg your pardon. Although we see God in nature, the enemy claims that the predictability of the natural cycles proves that the world runs on automatic pilot. And therefore, they will not be held accountable for their evil activities. And the degenerate people blasphemed your name. Now it says, Sforno identifies this people as the Persian kingdom that ruled Israel during the first 34 years of the Second Temple. So, we're getting a historical timeline here too, which is good to help us understand the climate politically and, how shall I say, on a normal global level. Now, verse 19 goes on, do not deliver the soul of your turtle dove to the band, meaning enemies. Israel, the weak and defenseless nation, is likened to the gentle dove. Now, it says, see Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 14. There's reference there too. Rashi adds that the dove is a classic symbol of fidelity. For even after the death of her mate, the female dove will not take a different mate. Unless people who have pigeons, they probably know that, but a lot of us wouldn't have. Similarly, although God left Israel bereft like a lonely widow, it never exchanged him for a different God. But there have been people throughout history that have created different religions, and that God has relatives. Now, verse 20, look upon the covenant. Simply, this refers to the covenant that God forged with our forefathers to redeem their descendants. Now, according to the Midrash, it refers to circumcision, for even when the Jewish people have no other merits, they can be redeemed in the merit of their circumcision. Verse 21, let not the oppressed turn back in shame. Now, this refers to the Jewish people that are in exile. Do not reject their prayers, turning them away empty-handed. Now, the Rambam cites this verse when teaching that it is prohibited to turn away a poor man seeking alms, meaning seeking a donation, needs charity. That's very, very big thing. Very big thing. You must always help someone like that, give them some coins, a beggar. Continuing on, let the poor and destitute praise your name when you respond to their prayers. So they're probably praying that, someone will give me some lunch money, and they're grateful when they get it. Or see that even in exile they praise you and therefore answer their prayers. Verse 22, arise, O God, champion your cause. Now, if not for our sake, then do it for your sake. I got 2 pages. Okay, then do it for your sake, for the campaign against the enemy is indeed your cause, since they have reviled and blasphemed your name. Now, verse 23, which is the final, Forget not the voice of your enemies, the brutal barbaric sounds mentioned above. And that was in verse 4. So there's a lot for us to draw from understanding the commentary and the background to these psalms. And that's what I find is so helpful, because often you can read the psalm and you think, and you've got 2 or 3 thoughts rolling around your mind what that might be. But if you've got a good copy and translation, it accompanies the verses with an explanation that explains certain things that might be a bit confusing, or clarifies things that you might think, well, I'm not sure what they're saying there. How does that relate to me? And so the Psalms are for everyone, Jew and Gentile alike. And I suggest, if you want to really get to the depth and the beauty of the wording and the meaning, then get yourself a copy of, this is all the Psalms in here, and this is the Kesuvim, the writings, the Psalms, and it's the Art Scroll series, and I always leave a description in the box below of the text, and that's what I use. And you can see there's, I'll just turn the page back here, I have some, and it's interlinear, so the Hebrew is there as well. But you get like the text up here, and then look how much commentary there is down here, and goes on, and that's just one page. So the richness of the Psalms actually explodes or rises, and you get a good exercise is read the Psalm, then come back and look at the commentary if you've got yourself a copy of it, and then go back and reread the Psalm again, and you get another layer of richness every time you read it. So please, if you're going to buy yourself a birthday present, then that's probably the thing you should buy for yourself. And remember, it's the next number of Psalm that is your birthday psalm. As I mentioned earlier, when I turned 73, my psalm for the rest of that year will be Psalm 74, which I have just read out and explained to you. So there's so many things about the Psalms that we don't understand, or that we overlook at times, and the Psalms are for everyone. So enjoy them. In the meantime, please take care, and God bless.